Hello. Thank you so much for being here to talk about one of the most talked about areas in the music industry over the last 9 to 12 months, AI, and independent artists. Today, there's more and more being demanded of artists than ever before. They have to be their own social media manager. They're an artist, they're writing, recording the music, they're their own booking agent. So it's no surprise that this is the audience that is engaging with AI the most and early. And we're really excited to talk about both of those topics, about AI and independent artists. If you don't know me, I'm Andrea Gleason. I'm the CEO of TuneCore. And if you don't know what TuneCore is, we are a platform that helps independent musicians who don't want to sign with a label be able to put out their music to all the digital platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, the libraries of TikTok, and Meta. But also, we help them find their first audiences and be able to grow. So we're really excited because for us, our mission is really threefold. And this is everything we're innovating at TuneCore right now is around three focus areas. One, we want to help our artists make better music. Two, we want to help them become better known. So if the music's good, how do we help it find its audiences? And three, we want to help make our artists' lives easier. Well, guess what? AI is actually touching all three of those areas, which is why we're engaging with AI very early and also being very thoughtful about how to do it responsibly. And I'm here with my friend and partner in crime, Dauda Leonard, who is the CEO of CreateSafe. And we've been up to some things this year, which we're really, really excited about. And even though it's in the very early phases of AI and how it's going to continue to evolve in the music industry, we're just so excited to get started early. So Dauda, would you mind telling everybody a little bit about CreateSafe and your role? Oh, and also, I should also really mention this. He's also the manager of Grimes. You know, just a little artist we know, so.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? So, as Andrea said, I'm the CEO of CreateSafe, and we're a software company building a product called Trinity, which is essentially a set of generative AI tools to enhance the creativity, distribution, and marketing of music. We believe that we have entered into this sort of like new era of the internet where streaming just isn't enough, and artists are looking for new ways to monetize their music, specifically around new ways of fan engagement. And AI is the perfect solution for this new expressive way to play with music. And so we're just going to show a couple of videos that showcase the power of AI and playing with music and engaging with your fan base, essentially turning fans into community and community into collaborators.
I'm Kito, and this is the story behind my new song Cold Touch with Grimes AI. Grimes tweeted that she'll split the royalties with anyone that makes a song using her AI-generated vocal. I decided to give it a try. I entered the ElfTech portal and described the kind of song I wanted to make. Aggressive, but not too aggressive. Also kind of sad. I then hit transform, and I waited for it to generate.
Turning Dauda's voice into Marvin Gaye's. Step 1. Record yourself. 4 to 5 raw vocal recordings are recommended. Step 2. Upload recordings onto Trinity.plus to train your voice model. Step 3. Upload a song you want to cover. Iconic.
I hope that the feeling was so, and if you feel like I feel, baby, then hello, hello.
That's the first time I saw that. I really enjoyed that. That was amazing.
So as you can see in like the first example, that's a producer songwriter being able to use Grimes' voice, make a new record, and then distribute it to platforms like Spotify, TikTok, et cetera, and split royalties between Grimes and that artist Kito. And it created this new world of fan engagement that didn't exist before AI, that not only allows a artist who's independent to exploit their IP in a whole new way, but also where fans can engage and also potentially, not only collaborate with their favorite artists, but extend their career. Then the second video, it's obviously me just having fun with music as a fan of music, being able to hear my voice on like one of my favorite songs. And I don't sing, I can't sing. But in that video, it's kind of sounded like I could sing. And it was just like, a really cool moment of, being able to play with music and imagine, as we continue to build this platform, there'll be, systems in place where like I would pay to be able to play with Marvin Gaye's voice like that.
Awesome. So much fun. So should we tell everyone how we met?
Well, yeah, so last year at another conference in Ibiza, it was an electronic music conference, IMS, we had just begun to launch the product that we launched with Grimes, which was called Elf Tech, which is sort of, the way we look at it is it's like a music game within this platform. And we launched it that weekend, or we were about to, and Grimes and I were both speaking at IMS, and we talked about how, she was gonna allow people to use her voice and make songs with it. And instantly that weekend, artists, began trying to make songs with her voice and trying to upload them through, different platforms. And Andrea and I had just met
I walked up to him at the bar.
And was basically.
And I was like, who's gonna do this for you?
Yeah. And we were like, well, we're already building, this tool to be able to do this. But what it dawned on us is that like we in this sort of like new open internet, like why would we want to restrict this type of technology to only be available on our platform? Mm-hmm. And that same night after you and I met, an artist had made something with Grimes' voice and wanted to upload it to TuneCore, but it kept on getting like struck down. And so I immediately emailed you and I was like, hey, we got to figure this out. And over the weekend, we started to figure out, a solution to allow TuneCore users to be able to use our platform and essentially make songs with Grimes' voice and distribute them on TuneCore. Yeah. And it was the first time you've ever actually seen like the ability to do like a featured artist clearance at scale. Typically, it costs like $2,500 minimum to like get an agreement done, with a lawyer. To be able to use someone's name, image, likeness on your record. But we built one of the first licensing and legal agreements that make it possible to do, to not only use AI in this way, but also streamline a super cumbersome and expensive process that happens in the music industry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for us, obviously it was very early. We started conversations in May. I think we got it announced by June. And anytime you're engaging with new technology, especially I think what's really unique that's happening with AI, I feel like there's a lot of parallels of what happened when music was starting to be put on Napster. It's like the toothpaste is out of the tube, there's no putting it back. And
Totally.
You've got to figure this out.
100%. I mean, people are like, there's a Discord server that exists. It got shut down by the RIA sometime last summer, but by the time it got shut down, I think there was around 500 or 600,000 people in it. It's called AI Hub, and they're just like fans of music. They're not pirating music this time around. They're actually creating, and that's a weird thing for the music industry to want to stifle a bunch of people who are like expressing their creative, desires. Yeah. That server is now back up and running, and it's now back up to like 200,000. So it's like there's clearly an appetite for people who want to create in this way. And even without AI, you see it within the age of the attention economy, where TikTok, Reels, Shorts, that's like the way in which people are consuming music. and they're engaging with music. People have decided like listening is no longer enough. They want to actually play with music, and the music industry right now hasn't fully adopted that. They're fighting that, although things like TikTok, Reels, YouTube exist where someone can speed up someone's song or slow it down, perform to it.
And that's forms of AI.
And those are also forms of AI, but people are just not necessarily realizing it.
Yeah.
So I think that like we're just at the earliest, the primitive stages of what this technology can do and how it can enhance, people's creative process, their marketing process, and their ability to express themselves.
Completely. And I think what's really important is that just because something's new and there isn't actually laws that are really set in stone yet. I mean, some are starting to happen now. I think the EU just passed some legislation yesterday, actually, breaking news. But you shouldn't be afraid to engage with new technology, or you could be passing up on the next wave of what's going to really transform. I mean, Napster really showed that, right? People didn't want to be stealing music. They just didn't have a way to buy it. So in comes iTunes.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, we'll just do that.
Totally. And all Apple did was they saw a behavior that people were already doing. The same for Spotify. People were already downloading music and putting it onto these devices. And Apple came along and said, let's make the best device and the best store for you to be able to do this. And then Spotify came along and said, hey, in order to fully eliminate piracy to a certain degree, let's make it possible so people can access music and not have to think about downloading it and storing on drives. And that completely opened up a new paradigm where artists can actually make a living making music.
Yeah.
If you do any research in the 90s, 2000s, there were not hundreds of thousands of people making over $50,000 or $100,000 a year making music independently. That didn't exist, let alone millions of people now who are making anywhere from like $50,000 or more. That's a huge expansion of the music industry that only exists because of streaming. But people decry the royalty system, but what they're not really looking at is that that's the music industrial complex that sort of stops more potential independent artists from potentially earning a living with their music because of the way in which certain aspects of how artists can become successful are gatekept. That's totally different from a platform that exists that allows for millions of people around the world to potentially discover your music. And now it's on us in terms of like the independent music tech companies and independent record labels and artists to create new ways to monetize these audiences that now exist because these streaming platforms exist. And you can actually capture those fans and create these like vibrant communities with your art.
Exactly. So just because something's new, if you have to think a few steps ahead of where it can go, we shouldn't be afraid to engage early. And I think that's 100%. What I'm so excited that we did is I'll walk you through how our partnership works for the independent artists. We essentially created a blueprint of how you can engage with AI responsibly in a use case. There's going to be many, many more use cases. But Grimes said, hey, you can use my AI voice to collaborate with in your music, but just pay me 50% like I ask any other collaborator.
Yes.
And so what we did.
What people, at a certain point in time, some people were questioning, well, why would someone just pay to use your voices if it's an instrument? And you're not actually paying to use Grimes' voice, you're paying to use her name, image, likeness.
Exactly.
And that's very different. Like anybody can like make something with her voice and not go out there and credit her, but they're essentially paying for the use of the tool as an instrument. But once they decide that they want to use her name, image, likenesses, which is what typically happens in the music industry when you're asking someone to feature on your song, what you're now saying is, well, okay, cool, split 50% of those master royalties with me. On the writing side, she's not a writer on these songs, and the writers of that music earn 100% of those royalties.
Yeah, but to your point, Grimes has built up an audience and a fan base that now she's helping these other artists who are collaborating with her participate in
100%.
to cross-pollinate their audiences.
100%.
So this is what you're paying for, essentially. And I think for us, what we were excited about is how do we make a process that is responsible and repeatable. So for us, we set out 4 principles for ourselves and how we were going to engage with AI early. So it's number 1 is consent. So there has to be consent, control, compensation, and transparency. And so in this partnership, essentially Grimes has already said, you can do this. And we point our artists to the CreateSafe website to do the voice transformation. I did this when I met Itaú at the bar, and I sang into his app, and suddenly I became Grimes. Crazy. And then you export that, either what you just sang into the app, or if you upload a WAV file, it will transform it for you. And then you bring it back into your DAW and create as usual. And then you come back to TuneCore. So we give you some specific instructions of how to upload and your track to be a collaborator with Grimes. And so you upload your release, you set to Grimes AI is the collaborator you set it to, and we tell you exactly how to do that. You set a 50% split, and then we send it over to Grimes management team for review. So we already have consent. Now for editorial discretion, if it's desired, this is where the management team can review and actually decide if something shouldn't go out. Then we do it for our regular review for meeting DSP requirements. And then we make sure the 50% split is set up. If it's not, we kick it back. We say you have to correct this. And so then you have compensation. And then it goes out, and then you have transparency, because it doesn't go to Grimes' profile, it goes to Grimes AI. So you know it's an AI voice. So this is one use case of just showing how can you engage early, thinking a few steps ahead in where legislation could go, because it hasn't been laid down fully yet, to do so responsibly.
Totally. Cool. So what do you think the benefits of being independent in the modern music business is?
Number 1 that I hear from my artists all the time, because I have a lot of artists that actually have been on a major record label deal, and then they end that, and then they come back and start releasing with TuneCore. Number 1 thing is that they get creative control. They can call the shots. They can decide they want to do a Grimes AI collaboration, and they don't have to run it through their label. They can put the music out when they want to put it out. They have just more freedom about timing. I can't tell you how many artists I hear is like, I've been time boxed. I have to work around so-and-so's other release date, and I have to wait my turn. Timing, huge, huge benefit. And just be more experimental. I mean, and you work with the most experimental artists there is. I mean, Itaú, what are you seeing that independent artists are, how they're kind of operating and making a different lane and kind of driving innovation?
Well, there's also a good question here. It says, what steps can companies take to empower artists to leverage AI tools effectively while maintaining ownership control of their creative outputs? I think that goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Which is when you're independent, you essentially can control what can happen with your music. I think that like a lot of times when the conversation around like owning your masters or publishing, it's never really like explain what's the true benefit of that besides you getting the lion's share of the revenue from streaming royalties or sales. But the biggest opportunity is that you are able to license your music in games, and in these new types of AI experiences, and there's a large growing independent sector that owns all of this content. They could actually, through companies like TuneCore, come together and become a licensing body to all of these different AI platforms, and that's a way to create leverage for the independent sector when it comes to AI companies training on their music. Mm-hmm. But that can only happen, when you own your own music and you get to lobby for yourself and have that sovereign agency to decide what is happening with your music. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of being independent today, because there's a lot of emergent new technologies and platforms that are coming around where your ability to set your own price and engage will be how you're able to effectively monetize your music catalog, which is the most important thing when you're an artist.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the most creative genres and music is coming from the independent sector because they're not put in a box. It's not like, oh, you're pop country, you got to stay in that lane. They're blending genres, and sometimes the DSPs still don't know how to handle some of that. They're like, where do I put you? Even though we're not like in a physical record store anymore, where it's like you must fit in this shelf because it's an endless aisle. Still, I think this is an area that, because the independent musicians are the most creative, they're often ahead of everyone else of how to package it.
Totally. And I think that's another space where AI can be a huge benefit, where you can work with different large language models to figure out how to tag your music differently, to market it and pitch it differently. Like what large language models really, I think, like open up the door for an artist is as this sort of like creative co-partner in terms of like bouncing ideas off of, and it allows you to like take the data that you get from something like a Spotify for Artists or a chart metric and feed it into a large language model and get answers that one or two people in your crew are going to be hard to answer than having the power of like this sort of collective consciousness to like sift through data and give you actionable insights on potentially like where you could be touring, how much, they could tell you how much merch you should sell in a specific city based on data that you pull from, Spotify for Artists.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like I've seen some really creative things that independent artists have been doing with, because I think there's a couple of buckets that I've seen artists using AI for. One is to help engage with their audiences. This one was more accidental, but as an example, there is and I won't share the names because it's not my story to share, but I'll kind of sanitize it. So there's this particular artist who is an artist in her own right, but also is a songwriter and often writes for a big girl band. And the girl band didn't want the song, so she released it herself and said, hey, I actually wrote this for this other group. And that group's fans took to some of these AI communities of super fandom and grabbed the voices of those particular artists and were creating their own dream track of what would it have been if this song was actually done by that band. And so you can see how it creates like super fandom engagement where the fans really want to co-create.
Totally. I mean, I think it's a similar example that we're seeing, like going back to like TikTok, is like when you're as a content creator, you're taking songs and you're putting them in your content and you're using them, as a part of your identity. And I think that like the video that I showed of me putting my voice on, on a Marvin Gaye song is just more so me attaching my identity to this song, and using it as a content, creator. And I think that we're going to see more and more interesting creative use cases. I know you were telling me about Flavor Flav and what he's recently done.
Yeah, I think he worked with Harvard and translated his song into 27 languages. And so if you go to his profile, you'll find it. And so it's like available in the same song you hear in English, and then you can go listen to it in French and German, and really cool.
Yeah, Lauv has done a similar thing as well. I think he just transformed his song into Korean, because he has a very huge Korean fan base, and he made turned one of his records into Korean language, which is pretty cool.
And I think this is still working itself out because the translation part, I think there's no going around rewriting in the language. AI is not quite there yet in most cases to actually do the voice transformation in translating in the other language and get the pronunciation, but actually translating the lyrics properly. That we've got a little more to go, but because it gets tricky with melody and rhythm and all of that. But anyway, really amazing steps. And some of the things I've seen my artists do is more practical. Like sometimes their producer will want to hear how, before the artist comes into the studio, how things can kind of be experimented with. So just in the pre-creation process, before you come in and spend the studio time, how can you kind of hear different ways that the song could go with arrangement?
I know of an artist team right now that is working closely with their label, and what they're doing is they're collecting songs and they're putting them in this artist's voice, and then collectively as a team, deciding like, okay, does this record sound really good? And so they're reducing the time that it takes to like have to go in and like demo songs and feel if like they're gonna actually love the song in that artist's voice. And the artist is participating in this process, and it allows them to like work creatively on other aspects of like their new album process.
Exactly. And sometimes even after the fact, I had an artist who did the recording in the studio, and then the producer kind of sent it to him, and he was listening to it, and he's like, oh, I don't remember recording that bit there. It's like, well, we thought it was missing something, and we wanted to put it in afterwards, but we didn't want to make you come back to the studio to put it in. He's like, I rather like it, and he kept it in. So, it just, you can see the efficiency in the production process of just even the artists within their own music finding efficiency. I know a lot of artists are doing their liners with their AI voice so that they don't have to go and do all those readouts for radio. I mean, some people still really like doing that and personalizing it, but this could be going back to all the hats independent artists have to wear and artists in general have to wear. How can we get back some of that time?
Totally.
How can we get back some of that time?
So how do you think the music industry at large has responded to this sort of explosion of like the generative AI industry?
So I think initially everyone was freaked out that suddenly there was going to be mass creation of content. I know in my discussions with the DSPs when we were starting to talk, that was their immediate concern was, are we going to get flooded? And I think it's just so early. While it is easier to make music, you're still having to make the music. And if you want music that's going to be listened to, it has to be good. So AI is making it easier to make music, but you still have to put that human touch to make the music good. But I think there's...
And also market it. I think that like we've gotten to this place where there's hundreds of thousands of songs being released every day. So even if there's like this moment where people are just like letting AI generate songs, like that doesn't mean that these songs are gonna like stick out. And it's gonna be all about like how do you actually cultivate a fan base. But you were saying... Yeah,
to build on that, because you're absolutely correct, what I've seen is 100% AI generated music is definitely going to disrupt and is disrupting functional music. For like faceless music that can be put into, for syncs or whatever. But the artists that are making it, it's because it's not just the music. Yes, the music has to be good, but it's about the artist too.
100%.
And so that's not that easy to replicate. And to your point, I think what I get so excited about is how there's the marketing side of how it can create efficiencies for artists. I mean, there's these, tools to help you make your music videos faster. You just dump all your pictures and videos and it'll create it for you based off of the music you put behind it, and then you can tweak a few things. Greatly reduces your time to be like video editing as an artist. I mean, I know everyone's proud about their multi-hyphenations, but let's like get to the important, the important roles and how can the artist spend more time being an artist. So that's what I get really excited about. I've also seen artists, use ChatGPT to inspire them on putting copy together for their social media posts to make it like interesting and clever, and it becomes like iteration, inspiration, another avenue to move a little faster on the marketing side.
What do you think about the record labels and sort of like the I guess the political part of the industry and how they've responded to generative AI? So
I think that everyone had learned a little bit from the Napster days and have been much more open. So yeah, so the artists, so from the industry side, everybody's leaned in more. And I think that one thing I get excited about is that I actually can ask my artist. So there's the industry perspective, and then there's like the artist perspective. And guess what? I have over 1 million artists that have used TuneCore, and I can go ask them. So we did a study as all this was breaking, just to understand how artists are already using AI, and then how, if they're interested in it, well, how are they using AI? How do they feel about AI? And if they are interested in using certain things in, for their creative process, and also what are they worried about? So I actually have some of those slides here today that I'm going to pull up and share with you all on what artists are saying. All right, so a little bit about the study is we were able to get responses back from nearly 1,600 respondents, over 10 countries, and there was a really balanced results across genres. And this I found really interesting is that over 57% of the respondents had over 10 years of experience in the music industry. So this is again on my platform, which often is usually associated with artists that are just beginning their career, but we also have artists that have been at this for a while. And so really good feedback that this isn't just new artists, this is also artists that have been in the music industry for a little bit. So what were the results? Number one, what we found is that artists actually overall either were using AI, interested in using it, and had positive sentiments toward it. And then there were also those that were unaware and had concerns about it and fears. But again, let's go back. This is May last year, as this was all starting to become a little bit more widely known about in the industry, that you can start using these tools. So this is very good early adoption from artists. The other thing that we saw is that 27% of them are predominantly using it in the marketing creative process. So they're using it for their artwork, they're using it to create promo assets, they're using it to engage with their fans. And then when we ask them, how are you interested in using it in the future, you can see that predominantly they were interested in continuing to use it for their marketing, but also wanted to start to utilize it for Gen AI, dabble with Gen AI. And then when we ask them, hey, how are you thinking about the training side of it? So for machine learning and generative AI, this surprised me, is that 50% of the respondents said that they were willing to have their music and their artwork utilized to actually train models, but it had to be done responsibly. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. And a third would grant their consent to have their music used in Gen AI. Now, what does this boil down to? Essentially, this was the perception to be able to use their music in Gen AI and machine learning if, both on voice recognition and artwork, if it's done with their permission, if it is done with compensation, and if they get credit. So very leaned into new technology, but there needs to be something in it for them, right? And then when we look at what are the fears, predominantly it's the things that you would expect. Plagiarism, are they being replaced? Is there fair distribution of recorded music revenue? So this is really kind of informed for us when we did this study. We put it out in July of last year, that our core 4 pillars of principles of how we engage with AI were the right ones of consent, control, compensation, and transparency. And since then, we've been working with our partners on licensing opportunities. You mentioned that earlier. How can we create opportunities for our artists? But the only way we're engaging is if it aligns with those 4 principles for ourselves. So yeah.
So how do you feel that artists have responded to the ability to use Grimes' voice within the TuneCore platform?
So I've talked with a few of them, and I think for them, they were so excited they can co-create, and they would have never had access to be able to co-create with Grimes, and they are able to do that in a way that is also fair for them. It's a fair exchange, right? As we said earlier, that they're benefiting from her audience that she's built and her name, but also, they can put out creative new music, so they get to experiment.
Totally. And there's a question here that asks further into this. It says, does the usage of Grimes' image and likeness with Grimes AI tool cover featuring her likeness in an animated music video? And while we haven't necessarily, because these legal frameworks are still very new, we didn't think about that in that iteration of that agreement. But overall, I think on the sort of on the surface, it does cover that, because Grimes would like there to be videos made of this music, and people have already made different types of videos that have used AI to generate, whether it's like an anime kind of style video. And people have also, taken it outside of just using the voice for songs, and they've put it in games. And so I think an artist like Grimes is very open to what's possible with the technology and how creative people are going to be with it. And so the jury's still out in terms of where this is headed. But for someone like Grimes, she really wants she looks at it 100 years into the future. If technology and humans are still kind of doing what we're doing, and she won't be around, there'll be this instrument, this VST
Exactly.
that continues to be able to generate new IP for her legacy. And I think a lot of artists are gonna begin to see how this is almost creating a VST, but with a lot less cost and a lot less work involved.
And if you think about it over time, an artist's voice changes over time. So you can go back to creating, even for the artists themselves, how can I create music with the voice I had in 10 years ago?
Yes, 100%. I think that as a preservation tool, because there's another question here that talks about mitigating potential biases in AI algorithms, what role can AI play in fostering greater inclusivity and diversity within the music industry, and how do you mitigate potential biases in AI algorithms? And I bring that up because it really, the onus is on us to utilize this technology now that it exists. And so if you want to potentially mitigate these biases and have more diverse data sets, that means that you're going to have to contribute to these data sets with your sounds, your voice, your voices, your ideas. Once again, this is where licensing, when you're independent, comes into play. These companies are looking for access to good data. You just have to want to engage with these companies. You can sign up for a lot of them. You can become beta testers. That's how they end up training these models.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, because I spent a lot of time with the DSPs who have algorithms, and we talk about the biases. Obviously, if right now, just so you all know, women are greatly missing in popular music. While we've had the best strides we've had to date, this year or last year, only 35% of artists on the Billboard Hot 100 chart were women, while the population in the US is 50% women. So, and that's the best year it's been ever in over a decade. And you go down to the creator roles of songwriter and to producer, and it's even less. It's continues to be underrepresented. More technical the role, the more women are missing. And you're absolutely right. I think that you can look at that, though, as an opportunity, because in talking with the DSPs, and they really do want to be a part of that solution, they are thinking about what happens with some of the algorithms that exist already, because a lot of when you finish listening to something you picked, algorithms actually play you something else. Yeah. And they're really trying to be thoughtful to get out of that cycle, so it's not self-perpetuating. And I think as we think about AI, we need to absolutely have that same approach, same considerations to make sure we're changing the cycle. And so I think that it's the technology is the technology. Those of us that have access to the technology, how are we being responsible in how we're using it and building principles for ourselves of how we use it to actually create a more diverse, a more responsible music industry. And I think that, obviously not everyone's gonna take that approach, but there are really incredible leaders in the industry that are having these discussions.
Yeah, I mean, there is a platform called Hugging Face. It's where all of where every generative AI company hosts their models, except for the ones that are like really closed. And then you obviously have GitHub, where like all of the code for like a lot of open source development exists. And now you have things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, that you're able to take all three of those, systems and essentially build your own and fine tune your own models. Like I know, like one of our engineers was not a machine learning engineer, and has become a machine learning engineer over the past year and a half because he just spent time in these open source platforms and using AI. And he comes from sort of a music background, and now he's helping to develop like integral parts of our platform. And so it's very easy. It can be daunting, but it is actually more easy today to get involved in the development and training of these models than it's ever been to influence the big tech.
Yeah, yep, totally agree. So I think another area that we can talk about a little bit is what's happening with music that is for relaxation.
Well, yeah,
there's a lot happening.
I'm the biggest fan of like functional music, specifically a product called Endel, which we actually did a partnership with them some years ago to train their AI. So Endel is essentially an adaptive generative soundscape application. What that basically means is based on, you choose a bunch of different modes: sleep, move,
Concentration,
study, focus, and they have a couple of other ones, but you select that mode and then it plays a soundscape based off of the time of day, the weather, if you are using a wearable, your circadian rhythm in terms of your sleep, heart rate, and it creates a soundscape based on those inputs personalized to you for those type of moods. And we collaborated with Endel to do a sleeping one for babies. And now they've done successful other collaborations with like James Blake and Richie Hawtin and Miguel. And they're now also creating fixed versions of those soundscapes that live on DSPs.
Yeah.
So that's another way to engage with AI and participate, because you can do versions of your songs, and create another experience around your music on these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, if you go look up like the Endel, like it's an artist name actually on the platforms, on the DSPs, and you can see like versions of popular music that has been made for relaxation version, for concentration, for sleep, which is so cool. I'm like, oh, I can listen to Kill Me Softly, but I can just like go to bed to that. That's amazing.
They've done a deal with Universal Music Group, so you're gonna start to see a lot more popular artists having these like soundscape versions of their songs.
Yeah, because I think IFPI put out a study. They did a really big survey at the end of the year to talk about how a lot of people are listening to music, and they are listening to it to relax.
100%.
In the 24-hour, like I work for a global company, and I was telling Dawuda backstage, like my alerts are always turned off because I would get pinged constantly. I probably have like 20 Slack messages just sitting here right now. So I have to shut that off. And everybody is seeking a way to relax. And it's this is what the IFPI report found, is that there's this increased consumption for relaxation. And so how do we create like popular songs in this new lens, knowing that this is also what people are listening to?
For sure. I think I kind of said this before, like the consumer behavior now is to engage and play with music and use it. Music is not really a commodity, it's an experience. And so when you say, I listen to music, or I want to listen to music to relax, like that's the experience that you're looking to get out of music. You're not purchasing it to just collect it. Like that was collecting is one part of music, and it still exists from whether it's vinyl or other pieces of art, but it's truly an actual experience, and that's what streaming and social media has opened up for the world in terms of like how they can engage and play with music.
Awesome.
Cool. You want to take some more
Yeah,
questions?
we should take some questions. Yeah. So this one actually should be for you. Is how has the rev share been going? Does it show promise as a business model?
So to date, there have been like thousands of dollars generated. I think it's around like 50 grand that has been generated and split between Grimes and artists. Some of that has happened from streaming revenue, and then some of it's happened from like on-chain purchases. Which this conversation was not about like blockchain technology, but the interplay between blockchain networks and AI is going to be incredibly rewarding to any artist engaging with both technologies. The infrastructure of our platform is built using smart contracts. So anyone who's connected to that application, ElfTech, that we're able to use Grimes Voice, is tracked using a smart contract, all the interactions, and that's how we manage the payment process of splitting the revenue between Grimes and artists who are not using TuneCore. And that's like when we think about it, like 50 grand so between Grimes and multiple people overall isn't like the biggest number, but for primitive technology, it's huge because one, Grimes isn't like the type of artist that is like consistently marketing and promoting an application or buying merch and things like that. But it shows what the potential use case is for a rights holder or an artist who does want to sort of like have a marketing promotions engine wrapped around that. Yeah.
I think the most fun thing I saw early on was how people who were never thought about recording music decided to actually, okay, I'm not going to sing as myself, but I will sing as Grimes, and I will create music using her voice. So it's opened up somebody who maybe would not have put out music.
Yeah, we have a great example of that because this is the number, the 50,000 that I'm talking about from the royalties is different from there's a artist who made a song called Egg Roll with Grimes' voice. She's a journalist. Her name is Sherry Hugh.
She runs Water and Music.
Yeah, she runs Water and Music, are very popular. Okay, people.
Yeah.
And what we have this partnership with this company called Indify, which is basically like a strategic marketplace for investors, focused on marketing music. And we distributed the song to Indify, so that Sherry could like create a proposal for a marketing campaign to market this music. And one of the most successful investors on that platform invested, I think, like 10 grand into that song. And now they had a budget, right before they put it out to start marketing that record. And whether Sherry continues to make music and put out songs, it gave her that opportunity to express herself in a way that she, hadn't, thought about doing before publicly, and generated that's typically what you would call like a marketing advance or a record label advance. And she doesn't have to give up the ownership of that copyright, and she just shares in the revenue with the investor. In two different ways, it has become valuable to not only people within the community of users who are using Grimes as a voice, but also Grimes.
Yeah, so that's good revenue. Even if it's early, it's like you can start creating a new lane for yourself.
Totally.
And it's still very early, so we'll see. Yeah, there's a good question here about how do you balance the integration of AI tools in music creation with preserving the authenticity and human touch in artistic expression. And I think it actually, yes, you still have to be kind of involved for the music to be good. And in fact, it can help you where maybe, as a human, you could jump, only so high. You can get into a rocket and, go to space, and technology helps us do that. It can actually help you do things you couldn't do before. And you have some interesting use cases around this. I mean, one, you did that video, right? So, that's a good example just for yourself that you can actually cover a song, just like your voice can only carry it so far, but because you're using your AI voice to actually cover that song, it gives you new abilities.
It's still my own voice, and it's also my ideas, like essentially in wanting to create that cover. Like other things that our technology allows you to do is break the song into stems. I could, easily via text to audio change the instrumental based on whatever idea that I was thinking of. I could speed up or slow down the record, and so I could make almost like a brand new recording in a matter of minutes, using my ideas the same way I would be using a typical DAW. So it's more so like the automation that's making the expressiveness different, but it's still like my ideas and my my own essence when I'm using my voice.
Yeah, I would add to that, like the Endel now, because obviously it's an app, but they're using that technology to actually use it as a DAW.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's taking some of those this space of kind of relaxation, but making it kind of a new lens that can be utilized based off all the things it's learned to actually make something that people really will listen to, because this is what it's also part of the training to make the best kind of music for that genre.
And once people start once people are able to actually play specifically with Endel, they'll be able to expand the genre, of functional music or ambient music in new, interesting ways.
Some of these are pretty broad. Let's take the A&R one. What advice would you give to A&Rs using AI to tailor strategies for rap artists, ensuring their music connects with the right audiences at the right time?
Well, there's a really incredible application that Lupe Fiasco was involved in. It's called TextFX. It's a collaboration with Google. So I think it's like their AI test kitchen. I'm blanking on, if you just look Lupe Fiasco LLM. And so basically he worked with them on a large language model interface that allows you to think about writing a rap song or rapping in the specific areas of how rap, right? So the alliteration of a word, the cadence, the flow. And so they really like broke down different aspects of the art of rap. And they encoded that into a process that now has this interface that you can prompt to write, records or collaborate with. And it's not meant for you to just like put some text, put an idea in there and say like, give me out a song. It's more about like how you input your ideas and it expands on your ideas specifically in the space of rap. And I think from a A&R perspective, it's probably a tool that can be used to help come up with like lyrics or metaphors and things that like you can share with an artist that you're working with to help them in their creative process. It's a way to potentially like rethink and reimagine other songs that are out there. Hip hop is based on sample culture and interpretive culture, and I think that a tool like that TextFX can really help with like expanding your ability to sample and manipulate, old rap, new rap, or different genres of music into rap.
Yeah, and I guess like with the right audiences piece, I think that there's been a lot of progress made with marketing because there's a lot of data. Like when my artists get their data on the performance of how their song did, they have to go sit there and look at their spreadsheets and be like, where did I have a pop, in which cities, and which audiences are most connecting with my music. And that's a lot for an artist to have to like analyze and then create actions from. But there is technology that's being built now, and some of it actually exists on the market, where that is being kind of already synthesized at scale and serviced up to be like, hey, you're actually in these markets, and here you're in this market, it's this kind of an audience. So it informs your touring, it informs maybe where you just did something on social media and suddenly you're seeing a pop there. Okay, let's go explore that further, and how do we better connect? So I think that in marketing, there's not just to rap, but to all genres. I think there's really great strides being made to get to the right audiences and digest and give advice on recommendations for the marketing plans and touring.
Yeah. I want to do this question. Isn't using AI to do more than you're capable of just with natural talent just BS? Huh? I think that it's like if you think about all of the tools that are available to people now before AI came out, like most of the time you could just like open up a keyboard, a brand new keyboard synthesizer, and press the button and it would play a full song. That like many of the most popular songs over the last 20 years were made just by that, like a producer walking in a room, hitting one key, and then being like, that sounds amazing, and let's just make a song on that. And so like the talent in that moment was not that producer hitting that button. The talent was like having the ear
Yes.
to hear that and act on it and create something out of that. So like when people talk about like the ability to do more, that's what every creator is always looking for. They're like most creators I've always worked with, like they're constantly looking for ways to extend and scale their abilities, right? Like you have these baseline ideas in your mind, but you aren't always able to get them out. And that's where you've seen the greatest artists exist in this world. Like it's through working with, teams and collaborators. So all AI, record labels, independent music technology companies, and all AI is doing is becoming another version of that. It's not like some steroid or something like that. It's just another random tool to use.
Inspiration.
100%.
Inspiration, what you do with that inspiration.
Exactly.
It's all human. Awesome, I think we are at time. So I want to thank you all for coming today and hearing us talk about some of the projects we've been working on. Yeah, the toothpaste out of the tube.
What'd you say?
The toothpaste is out of the tube.
Toothpaste is out of the tube.
AI is here, and now let's figure out how we engage with it responsibly and progress music forward. So thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Bye.